It's two surveys. Hey there, Will. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good. How was your holiday?
It was excellent. How about yours?
Really fun. Lots of dancing involved.
Oh, good. Where'd you guys go?
Denim and Diamond.
It's a good place.
I like it. It's really fun.
Sounds like fun.
Do you like dancing or no?
Kind of. Yeah, I did some dancing on New Year's Eve.
What'd you do for it?
Some friends came over, we had dinner and stuff. Drank whatever. I went to a bar in my house called The Porch. And we got a bottle of champagne and did some dancing there.
That place
No,
really good.
no, no.
It's on like 40th Street Indian School.
Yeah. There's another one that's very similar to that. That's not it. Yeah, it was interesting. It was fun.
What did you guys do?
That's a good guy.
Oh boy, that's exciting.
So, I'm there with my girlfriend. My girlfriend brought her parents. They had like a the guy kept asking one of her friends to dance with her. And like on the second time, you're going. So the third time you come and ask me to dance, I would get to take my girl and just go and start to dance. But you can do this quick. And I go to spin her, and as I spin her, I laid her arm down on her friend's shoulder, and I take his arm off. And I started dancing with her, and she freaked out. She didn't like it. I freaked out. But I made the girls dance with that. It was fun.
That's like fun.
What's up? Yes.
Two more projects. Oh, one of them due Saturday.
You ready to begin? It doesn't matter. I was just a rhetorical question. I was hoping somebody would say that so I could reply that. So, well, Happy New Year. Good evening, guys. Welcome back. I hope you guys had a good holiday season and didn't forget everything when coming back. All right. So this week, today and Saturday, we don't have a set agenda. I don't have any new topics to go over. So that's why I was asking you guys on Slack if there's anything you guys want me to go over. I absolutely do not mind if there's a previous lecture or previous topic you want me to go over. Even if it's HTML, I'm fine with that too. I hope that's not the topic, but I really don't mind going over any topic that you guys want me to. Just let me know so I can come prepared. I can do some research, bring you some good notes. For this class, the response I got was Redux. Basically, you guys just want me to repeat the Saturday class. That's why I got the feedback. So I'll go over Redux in a bit. However time it takes, I'll go over it, and then after that, it's just project work, okay? If it takes an hour, hour and a half or lesser, however much it will take me to go over, that would be the lecture, and then you guys are free to work on your project.
Just hit the main points.
Hmm?
Just hit the main points.
Just hit the main points. Again, if you guys already kind of not interested, it's fine if you want to work on your project or your homework. Homework, there's one due on Saturday. I hope you guys didn't forget about it. So go and take a look at it. Huh? Didn't I tell you guys before going off? There's one. Yeah, New York Times scraping or something. Oh.
That's the last required homework. So if you didn't require, New York Times.
Let me go back here.
That's already overdue.
Okay, so this is the homework, but it's due on this Saturday. So, I mean, if you guys were not aware, give it a try. I mean, it's not any hard and fast rule. Submit something, but you guys must have noticed. You guys can go back and change it, and our TAs are very nice enough to regrade it. So, but this is due on Saturday, so try your best. If anything is left, you can go back, and I would highly recommend. Again, I'm not sure what's the. I can't exactly remember how many homeworks you guys have to qualify to get the certificate or something. But if somebody is missing, please go back, redo the homework, get a better grade. Will and Nick are regrading them, so it's not a big deal. Just make sure you kind of fulfill the requirements so that you guys can graduate.
Is it pass fail?
Pass fail?
Yes. Like A is no different than B or C?
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the minimum is maybe a C. Do you guys know anything about it?
There's no minimum.
There's no minimum.
The grade doesn't go into the
No, I don't think it goes over the certificate. Okay. All right. So, you guys saw Redux on Saturday. So, Fernando, tell me what's the drawback of Redux, or what's the biggest issue with Redux?
You can mess up so easily.
You can mess up so easily. That's true. What else? From the understanding part, is it difficult to understand? Is it okay? Do you guys get the concept? I'll go over the concept anyway. But I just want to ask, did you guys get the concept or not? Like what it is, what does it do? Huh? What was that?
Quick reminder.
I'm drawing.
It's like,
Okay.
I understand that
Yeah.
it's to reduce most of the functions, but
Reduce most of the functions. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what's the biggest problem with Redux. The problem with Redux is we have not done enough React projects to actually appreciate Redux. Okay, that's the biggest issue with Redux. And we will, again, by the end of this class, maybe at some time in the future, you guys will not appreciate Redux until you guys have done some good number of React projects. The problem with, if you even read the Redux documentation, the creator of Redux, they tell you that what is your use case? If the question is, hey, do I need Redux? The answer is you don't need Redux. If that's the question you're asking yourself, okay? Again, if the question you guys are, well, do I need Redux in my project? Then the answer is definitely you do not need your Redux in your project. That's the first thing. What is your use case for Redux? Again, it's like it's like Matrix. Nobody can tell you. The problem with Redux is the same thing. You will realize if you need Redux on your own. Nobody can come and tell your project, hey, I think you need Redux for this. Okay. The thing is, you will do enough React projects, and maybe you will come across a bigger project that you're working on, and you will encounter some issues that Redux resolves, and then you will be like, oh, you know what? This is the time I need Redux. At this point in your current projects, you will definitely not need Redux. I don't think so. I am kind of pretty sure about that. Okay, if you think you need it, I would first say look at your architecture, how you have divided your components in your React project. Take a look at those before you jump into saying, I think I need Redux. Okay, you can at this point you can pretty much rearrange your components and kind of come up with a solution that it will resolve. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of companies, a lot of people I've seen use Redux in their projects, and I will tell you definitely there's no need for them also. You know, we are using for a small app in our company also, and I will tell you we absolutely do not need Redux. It's just because somebody heard about it, it's kind of cool thing, and they want to do it, so it's there, right? You can solve most of the issues even without Redux. Just the React app, they have made it so much better right now at this point that you can cover your use cases with React app also. Okay, but I'm not saying that there's not a use case for Redux. Redux come into place when you have a quite a big project, and I'll tell you how you would kind of encounter that. But if you have a bigger project, a lot more web pages, yeah, well,
I just think that the time you need it is when you can't figure out where your state is.
Right.
And that takes a long time to get to that point.
right.
Like any enterprise will eventually get there. But
Yeah. Eventually you will get there. That's what I'm saying. If you have a lot more, I don't know, it's not a very concrete example, like you have more web pages or something going around. We'll see what is when you will say, okay, you know, I cannot manage my state. Okay, so that's when you need Redux. But again, I'll give you the concept, so please concentrate on the concept. It's good because, you know, if you go in an interview right now and you project yourself as a React expert, not an expert, but you know React well, they will ask you an optional question about Redux, even though they probably are not using or using probably in a wrong way, but they interviewers like to ask some of this question just for the heck of it. They're like, hey, do you know Redux, or do you know these concepts? So you can, I want to make sure that you are comfortably able to answer those questions, okay, even though even if you don't use it. Okay, so before we look into Redux, we need to back up a little bit. Guys, remember about components? Okay, so what is components? The whole React is based on components, right? Everything, the whole concept of React is component based. Basically, you take your app, your web page, your website, and you divide it into components. Okay, and that's what the whole thing about React is. Okay, all right. When we look at components, now when we go into technical details, into coding, we saw two types of components: class and function. All right, this is very technical, class and functions, right? But I want to concentrate on the architecture point of view. Okay, from the architecture or the design, we saw two components. We said presentation, and the next one was container. Okay, do you guys kind of remember these two? Somewhat, yeah. So this is from the design perspective. In the coding, you will not see presentation or container. What you would see is class and functions. Okay. So what did we talk about presentation? We said presentation components are the one that have to do with the view, have to do with the looking part. How does your view look or your screen looks like? Okay. The container components are the one that do the work, that have to do something with the work. Okay, how your web page work. What I mean by this is when you make a call to your backend, you get the data and you update your web page. That's doing something work. Okay, looking is just a kind of static screen that shows you a welcome page maybe or something like that. Okay, there's no interaction, there's no buttons, there's no nothing, kind of remains static. That's your presentation. Okay, so now when we go into Redux, we'll be talking about the container. This is the one that is related to Redux when you talk about Redux. Okay. From going back to the coding part, presentation, we saw two type of properties or two type of kind of objects in React: props and state. Okay. When you talk about presentation, we are talking about. Anybody remember? Props or state? Props. And when we are talking about container or class components, we are talking about state. Okay. When I say Redux is focused on container, this means all the work that is being done, which means state. So Redux is concerned or is revolves around state. We'll see what it actually means and does. Okay. Any questions so far? You guys see how we are going towards Redux, but I'm kind of backing up so that you guys remember the concepts and how Redux is going to come into play. Okay? Any questions on components, definition? Fernando, you kind of get it, components now? Any questions you have in particular about components?
I think it was just that thing that was messing me up.
Okay. Okay. So I said Redux is about state. All right. So we are not going to concentrate on props anymore. We are going to look into state now. Okay. Now, before you look into Redux, there's a concept. This concept is part of React. It has nothing to do with Redux. There's a concept called lifting the state. Lifting up the state. It's lifting the state or lifting up the state. Anybody familiar with that, or anybody looked at the? So this is a part of the React documentation also. If you look at the React documentation, they had like steps. We started from the top. You guys remember we went down, but we didn't do all of them. One of them was lifting up the state. Okay. So lifting up the state. What's the concept of lifting up the state? Lifting up the state means literally you are lifting the state from your components. Okay. For example, let's suppose you are making a web page which has a login. Okay, login button. You enter something, you press login. And then you have something of a status. And then this status basically shows whether you are logged in or not. So this will status say user logged in or user not logged in, right? Based on when you click the button, whether you're authorized or not. Okay. When I look at this web page, and if you say, okay, divide these into components, I would say my parent would be app component. Okay. All right. Then I can divide it into this component and this component. I can say there's a component login. And then I have another component status. Okay, this will update the status. This will put up a string, nice, pretty words over here, and it will say whether the user is logged in. And login is the component that's going to take care of the login part. Okay. Now, what did we talk about state? We said state is local to each component. Okay. Local means it cannot exist outside the component. Okay. So my login component is going to have a state. My status is going to have a state. Even my app is going to have a state, right? But these will not exist outside its components. They're going to stay over here. Okay. Now, do you guys see the connection between these two components? That when I successfully log in, I want this status to know, of course, that somebody has logged in so that I can show that string. Okay. The problem is if I have a state over here which takes care of the login and kind of determines, okay, the user has logged in, I have checked my username and password, update my state saying, oh yeah, it's all good. My status over here doesn't have any idea how to access it. Okay? Because as I said, this state cannot exist outside this component, and status has its own state, but the problem over here is login needs, or the status needs that this state to make sure to show that I'm on the stream. Okay, you guys see the problem here? Okay. Any questions on the problem before we jump into the solution? All right, good. So we have two components. Login is the one that takes care of the login part. It says, hey, you have successfully logged in. Status needs to update when this is successfully done. But at this point, there's no way I can tell my status component that somebody has logged in. Why I cannot tell? Because these are basically siblings. If this was a child, I can do that. Okay, but right now at this point, they both are siblings and they have a common parent. Okay, that's where lifting up the state comes in. The solution for this is you take this state and you put this state over here. Okay, while they both have the state, whatever is going on, you don't update their local state. Instead, you update the parent's state. Okay, what will happen is, let's suppose there is a function over here which will say check for login or something. Okay, you guys remember from the props part we pass in like handle submit method, but this method actually exists in the parent, and that's how what's going on. So there'll be a method. You put the method over here. Then when you click the login, right, the username and everything is being checked by a function that exists over here. Okay, you guys remember from the previous exercise we did this. Okay, and then when the user has been successfully logged in, they will update the state that exists over here. And since this is a parent-child relationship, how would I pass this into the child? Using props. I'm going to pass the state into my status component using props. Okay? One more time. So we had a local state. There's a concept called lifting the state. If you ever run into this issue, what you have to do is you have to find the common ancestor or parent that belongs to, well, of course, it belongs to both of these. So whichever component that you're having trouble that you want to share information, you find their common parent and you raise the state. You handle everything that is related to the state in your parent so that they can pass that information to the child, which is sibling to this one. Okay, and this concept is called lifting up the state or lifting the state. Okay. Any questions on this? Yes.
So what if both status and login, whatever it is, has multiple states that are only local to them, and you only need the state property for the logged in actual?
Mm-hmm.
Is it logged in? Would you just raise that one property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So these still can have their local property, a local state. It doesn't. It's still okay. They both can have their own local state. That's fine. It's not shareable. Neither this one doesn't know anything about this one. This one doesn't know anything. So yeah, they can have their own local states too. Yes.
So you would only pass up the things that would be
Right. The things that you determine need to be accessed outside by some other parent, basically, or by some other component. Something that is shareable that somebody else might depend on. Okay, that's the one that you are passing on the top. Okay, and at this point, for your projects, or even I'm telling you for your professional projects, most of the time, a lot of the time, this will solve the problem. This lifting up the state and making it accessible will resolve your. If it is still not, I would highly recommend you take a look at your component and see how you can change your components before you look into some other solution. React is really good about it. They have introduced such tools, such things, that help you. You can create a really good app without any issues, just using React without any other state management tool. Okay, but for now, this is one of the things. Okay, any questions? All right. So then what happens is, let's suppose these are two components, so it's okay. Now maybe there are some other components in your app. You have like I don't know, 20, 30 components. Okay? And they are constantly passing in states. Okay? You come to a point you are like, well, I have like so many components, and my component over here, this component over here needs the state over here. So what do? I raise it up over here, I raise it over here. Now, as the tree goes bigger, you'll realize that you are lifting the state up to the components that actually never need the state. All right? There's a lot of redundancy going on. Right? The biggest problem, if you have a lot more components and then you're trying to use this lifting of the state, there's a problem called infinite loop. That's what you might run into. So what happens when the state gets updated, right? It notifies everything and your page re-renders, right? Without refreshing the page, but behind the scenes React is re-rendering it, right? So every time the state changes and whatever component is getting passed to, every component is going to get re-rendered. Okay, because the state of this component changed, this changed, this changed, this changed by the time it gets over here, right? If it's too convoluted and some other components are accessing the state, there's a possibility you will run into this. Again, this occurs only if you have like a lot more components, you know, and you are managing your state a lot more. And as I said, if you reach this point, you will know that there's some issue going on. Okay. Most of the time, I find it very hard. I mean, okay, it's a corporate website, really big components, then I can see it. But usually for smaller projects, it's kind of hard to reach this point. But again, if you reach this point, that's where Redux comes in. Okay. So, what is Redux helping us doing? So what would be if you have like too many states, you're passing in, you're passing out, right? What the solution that comes to mind would be, hey, what if I had like one common state that is shared among all the components, and every component would just be calling, if they require that state, every component would just call that state, get the information, do its thing, and then leave. Okay? And if a component does not need that state, it doesn't have to worry about it. Right? What if I had a global state? Okay? Like a kind of like one ring to rule all. Okay? I have like one global state that always reside in my application, and any component that needs that state just goes and talks to the states, comes back, accesses it, and then does it work. Okay? You guys see the solution? That you are extracting all the states out of all these components. All right. Remember we saw forms in React, and we saw a concept called controlled components. We were taking the forms has its own state, the HTML forms. So we were taking that state from the component and giving it to our React component. You're basically saying, hey, we are going to handle that state. Similar concept is going on. You are taking the state from the React components, and you are saying, hey, this is like a global state store. Okay? And this is, if you need anything to do with the state, this is what you're going to access. Every component is going to access this. Okay? The concept looks very attractive, and you're like, hey, well, I would just do this whole thing. Okay? But again, it's definitely an overkill to do this, and you have to write a lot more code for it also. Okay? So that's one of the drawbacks. So only if you think you have reached a point where your states are being passed around a lot, that's when you are like, okay, how about I create a global state store, and I put my states over there, and any of my components that need it will go and access it and then do its work and come back. Okay? Yes.
So what if you did did it without the global state, we have this application, all of a sudden it got so big you need it.
Yeah.
How much work is it to actually go back and re-implement this global state?
How much work?
So would it be beneficial to just from the start use the global state and have your application work that way in case it gets there?
Okay.
Or how much work is it to then put your application in this global state?
Okay. That's a really good question. So at what point do you basically realize, or how much rework is going to take? Okay. Looking at this, I would say I would still recommend following the normal React path and then converting to this. And the reason for that is, what was I thinking? Yeah. So the rework, the one possible requirement for the rework would be you would be running into issues. So of course you are looking for a solution. Okay. I still think it would be worth coming to this point first and then going this route. The amount of rework, again, I wouldn't say it's a lot. There's a rework, and I'll show you the code. And again, it just depends. How big is the application? But I still think that it would be worth going this route and then coming into that route. Yeah. The rework would be, it will require some rework, but it will still be worth doing this effort than going into it. There's some extra coding required. Again, this could be, again, it's the same thing. The projects that I'm talking about, maybe that's what they thought. They thought, oh, you know what, at some point it will grow so big, might as well just start using right now. Could be. But right now, at this point, you don't reap any benefits for going that route. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So when I talk about global store, that is basically what? That is what is what Redux is. Okay. Redux is from the definition, it says it's a state management container. Okay. Let me look up the exact definition. Predictable state container. State container. Okay. From these three words, you should be able to recognize two of them now. State. All right. This tells you it is dealing with state. Container. Same concept over here. Okay. We'll see what predictable means. But that's what it is. It's a predictable state container. What it means is it's a state management tool. State management tool that manages the state for you. And how it manages the state for you? Same concept. It takes the state and kind of puts it in a global state store, and it forces every component to go and search for the state from the global state. That's what it is. So basically you are giving the control to Redux, and Redux will handle all the state. Okay, same thing. Remember HTML forms I said? HTML forms by built-in have their own state, but when we use it in React, we are taking the control from the forms and giving it to our React components. Over here, we are taking the control of the state from our React components and giving it to Redux. Okay, so that Redux can manage the state for us. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay. Any questions on the concept? We'll see some of the technical aspects of this also. Okay. So what it takes it out is you don't have to worry about passing state using props or anything now. Okay, you'll be accessing the state. Your components will be accessing the state directly. How it works is, let me see if there's okay. Again, Redux became more popular with the React apps because when Facebook developed React, it was using React. It kind of got into this. They tried this, worked for a while, then they kept running into issues. So they came out with some other mechanism, and that's the state management tool. And they stumbled upon Redux. Some of the people who worked at Facebook kind of created this too, but technically, it has no relationship with React. It's an independent state management tool. You can actually use this in your JavaScript apps also. Okay? So Redux has no relationship with React. It just became more popular as people who use React started using Redux, so kind of became more popular tool. But there are a few more state management tools also out there, and you can use that also. They kind of do the same thing, but this is more popular, so you will hear the term React Redux a lot. Okay, that's why. But it has no relationship with this. It's a container for JavaScript apps. That's what it is called. Okay, when you look at the documentation, they will clearly say you can use this with JavaScript. Any app that is using JavaScript, you can use Redux for it. Okay, that was the disclaimer part. Now let's see, before we go into more technical, you guys must have seen these concepts. So React is based on three principles. The first is single source of truth. What this means is there's only one place that has the correct information, or you are giving all the control. You are saying there's only one single source that has everything that is true, and you're going to access that location only. Okay, that's what single source of truth means. That there's only one source that is true, and all your components are going to access this source and get all the information. Okay, that's the first principle of Redux. Okay, so you are giving the control to Redux basically for your state management. All right. The second one, and this is interesting, state that Redux handles is read-only. What is the other thing that is read-only? Right? Props. Props you cannot change. State we can change in React, right? But what Redux is saying is that you cannot change the state, right? It's kind of misleading. So what it basically means is that your views, your components cannot directly change the state variable, that is that global state, okay? They cannot directly change it. They can still change, but they can change based on some actions. And we'll see what that means, okay? You cannot do set state method on your Redux global state anymore, okay? You cannot do this. So that's what it means that it is read-only. You cannot use the set state method anymore, okay? Remember, props was read-only. You cannot, there's no set method, but in the state, in your React apps, there's a set state method. You can set the state. What is happening is your components call this, all right? Your container components call this method, kind of sets the state. But in Redux, there's no set state. You cannot do this, okay? There's a way you can do it. And what they call is that's through actions or events. We'll see what that is. Okay, so you have to you can set this state only through some action. Whenever some action occurs, that's when you can set the state. Okay, and for that to occur, you have to kind of fire some action, and you should be listening to this event or action, and then it goes and updates the state. Right? That's what it means. You cannot directly update the state. Okay. The third one is, this is interesting, pure functions. So Redux uses something called pure function. So this is pure function versus impure functions. Okay. Again, this is going to this part, predictable. What does predictable mean, just in English language? Yes.
Means you're going to get the same. If you give something one piece of information, you're always going to get the same response back.
Exactly. Yep. That's what predictable means. And this predictable ties in with this pure function versus impure function. So what is the difference? Impure functions are basically non-predictable. You cannot predict what the result is going to be. How is that possible? You write a function that does some calculation using the random function. Okay? You write a function that calls in the random function, gets a random number, multiplies it, let's suppose that's the function, and returns you the number. Is the result going to be the same every time I call this function? No, it's not going to be, because it's going to randomly generate a number and return me a different. And this is the definition of impure functions. Impure functions do not return the same result every time you call them. Versus pure functions, if I had a function where I pass in two numbers, a and b, and then I say return a plus b. Every time I pass the same numbers, am I going to get the same result? Yeah. Every time I pass in 2 and 3, I'm going to get 5. Right? No matter how many times I call this method. And this is called pure functions. What predictable over here is saying, every time you call the state, you will guarantee that you will get the same response. There won't be any change. Like I call this one time and I call, given the state hasn't changed, you will always get the same state back. That's what predictable means, that whatever you give in, you're going to get back the same response. Okay? And that's what pure function versus impure functions are. Okay? Any questions on that? So these are the three principles. If you get asked, these are the three ones. Single source of truth, state cannot modify, it's read-only, and the third is Redux only uses pure functions, which is the result is always going to be the same no matter how many times you call it, and this ties into your predictable, state, and then container. Let's see. Okay. Getting it? A little bit. So at this point, the concepts are important. Again, when you are working on it, again, I was saying that you guys don't need it in your projects, but if you want to, just, for the heck of it, just try. There's no harm in using Redux. Nothing will happen. I was just trying to explain that the use case is not there. And the biggest disadvantage is that we haven't done enough React apps to actually appreciate that. So that's the only problem. But if you guys want just a new concept, you guys want to try it out, please feel free to use it in your project. Give it a try. You will learn something. You will say, okay, this is how it works. You probably won't see any advantage right now. The biggest myth is that it kind of speeds up your app or website. It does not. It has nothing to do with the speed or anything. Okay, it absolutely does not. Okay, if my website is slow, it's probably the fault of mine that I have bad code or something. Redux is not going to help anything with that. Okay, that was interesting. Yes.
So from what I can tell, one of the major benefits of TP separating your code and debug seems to be like what we need to do.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Now, yeah, if you're trying to debug your components and you're running into some issues that it's kind of hard to debug, but now you have a global state, so it'll be easier to debug. But again, why would it be difficult to debug? The reason it will be difficult to debug is you have a lot of components, right? If you only have like 5 or 6 components, there shouldn't be any issue debugging. Kind of circles back to the same thing. But definitely give it a try and see how it works out. It will at least give you an experience from the coding perspective. Okay. Now we are going to jump in these 3 principles. I will show you how they tie into Redux coding part now. So the first part is single source of truth. Okay, and we said I talked about the global state and everything. So what this translates to in Redux from the technical point is something called store. Okay, when you start creating a Redux app, the first thing you will do is you will create a store, a global store for your state. Okay, and that is going to be your single source of truth. Okay, that's the first part, store. Okay, your source, how many stores can you have? Just one. That kind of makes sense. It's a single source of truth, so you can only have one store. One store and one store only. You cannot have 2 stores. The second is, from the coding perspective, to create a store, you use a function called createStore. Okay? Simple. I'll show you, if you guys are interested, how to code this out too. But if the first time you start up, you got the store, what method you use is createStore. And when you want to get the state from the store, the method is getState, store.getState. Your createStore takes a function which is going to be a pure function. Okay, and in Redux terms, we call that function reducer. I'll talk about reducer more. Going back again, you create a store. The function is createStore. The parameter that it takes in is another function, which is going to be a pure function. In Redux term, it's called reducer. So reducers are your pure function that will always return the same response every time. Redux, we call them reducers. Okay, if you want to get the state from the store, you use the method called getState, store.getState. Okay, and that is store for you. The second is, yeah. Okay, any questions on the store? All right, we talked about the global store, that's what it is. The second is actions. So these were the 3 principles. Now we are looking at the 3 technical aspects of Redux. What 3 things you need. The second is actions. Actions are your simple JavaScript objects. That is what actions are. Okay, they are JavaScript object. What it means is you create an object, right, with curly brackets, and then you have some attributes here, and then you assign some value. This is what action is. Okay, it's a JavaScript object. Okay, we saw a store. The second is actions. We create some JavaScript objects and we call them actions. Actions have 2 attributes. One is, the first is called type, and the second is called payload. Type is a string. The value for this type is a string, and this payload can be another object. Okay, going back. The second part is actions. What are actions? In Redux, they are JavaScript objects. And remember, objects, we use the curly brackets to declare an object, all right? And then objects have a field or an attribute. In Redux, it has two attributes. One is called type and one is called payload. In the type field, you will put any action that is meaningful to you. Let's suppose I have a web page. I think that's the example you guys must have seen on Saturday, the increment counter one. I can show you the add subtract one. Let's suppose I'm trying to add or subtract something on my website. My actions would be, the action type would be add, subtract, multiply, or for so on. Okay? And my payload could be the number that I'm trying to add by. Okay? So those are your actions. Simply, actions are your JavaScript objects. Okay? The third is your reducers. Okay, we already talked about reducers. When you're creating a store, you pass in a pure function. And that pure function in Redux term is called reducers, and that's what it is. When you get asked what is a reducer is basically a pure function, and that gets passed into your store. Okay, since reducer is a function, it could have parameters, right? I'm going to create a function called reducer. You can name it anything. Okay, your reducer or your pure functions that you pass in have two parameters. Let me see if I can. What's this? Okay, it has two parameters. The first parameter is current state. I'm writing this in plain English, but of course it's going to be a variable name. You can name it anything. But the first parameter is always going to be the current state. All right, current state of your application. That's what you pass in. And the second is your action, which is a JavaScript object. Okay, so these are the two things that go inside your reducer. Again, reducer is a pure function, right? Predictable part. These get passed into, they are a parameter into your store, and you define your reducer, which is a function, and it has two parameters, your current state and your action. Okay, based on your action, you will do something, and that would be your function body. Whatever you do, I can show you some code, but based on that action, you will be doing something, and that's what your reducer does. Okay, and your reducer is going to return, any guesses? What should your reducer return? I'm taking in a current state. Based on some action, I'm updating this current state. Huh? A new state, yep. So your reducers basically return the new state. Okay, you pass in the current state, you pass in the action, you modify your current state based on some action, and then you return the new state. All right, that's what reducers do. All right, any questions? If you can believe this is Redux, that's it. There's from the concept wise, there's nothing more to Redux. This is what Redux is. Yes. Okay. So what you need to remember are the three principles of Redux, which is the first is a single source of truth. All right. The second is your state is read-only. You cannot modify it directly, or basically your views cannot modify the state. You have to modify the state. Now with this information, how do you modify the state? Using your reducers. All right. And what was the third one? The third principle? Pure functions, reducers, pure functions. Redux is based on pure functions. What it means is it's a predictable state management. Your functions do not give you a different response every time. Okay, it will update the state, and then if there's no action taken on the state, you will get the same state back. All right. And when we go into technical aspect, the first we saw was the store, second was the action, and the third is reducers. These are the three components of your Redux app. When you create your Redux app, or you include your Redux into your app, you have to define a store, you have to create actions, and then you have to create your reducers. All right, these are the three things. Okay. Let's see. All right. Any questions from the concept perspective? You guys want me to kind of code something out for you guys? Yes. Okay. That's going to take some more time for your project, but let's go ahead and do that. So if you guys want, you can follow it or kind of look into it. So what I'm going to do is go back here. So I'm going to create I'm going to start with the React app. Since again Redux that's not necessary, but since we are looking into only React aspects, so I'm going to create a React app. Then I'm going to add Redux to it. All right. My example is kind of similar to the increment one that you saw. It will have a number here, and you'll have add and subtract. Basically, these are two buttons. When you click them, it adds a number and it subtracts a number. The good part about this is you will see how we start from the store, how we define the actions, and how we define the reducers. And these can be directly mapped into your apps also. Okay. So let's go ahead and create an app. React, create React and this example. You guys remember the two node libraries that we need to use when it comes to Redux? The first is Redux and the second is React hyphen or dash Redux. Right. If you already have a project, you can go ahead and do an npm install. As soon as this gets done, I'm going to do a npm install for these two, and I should get these two installed. So we saw action, store, and reducers. If you guys had to take a pick, which of these So in any app, we have to create these three components: store, actions, and reducers. What would be the easiest one to create? Store, actions, or reducers? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just wondering. Start with what? Store. Okay. So remember, what does it take to create the store? You have a function create store, and then you have to pass in a reducer. So then you have to create a reducer. Is there something simpler than that? What are actions again? The JavaScript objects, right? In my opinion, these would be the easiest. These are just simply JavaScript objects, and these are independent of anything. Or, well, they're not totally independent, but when you create them, you're not dependent on anything. You just create them, and they're there. Okay? But that's just my opinion. I'll show you how we create the actions, and you guys can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to add this to my package.json. So I'm going to add well, it's not required because I'm not going to use this project, but yeah. So minus saves, puts it into your package.json also. And I'm pretty sure it's React Redux. Okay. React Redux. This here. Okay, looks good. Let's go ahead and just want to make sure my app is running. There's no issues with install. Okay, looks good. So this is the boilerplate code that is working. Let's see, I don't need all of this. I'm going to just remove this here. Okay. We don't need this. Come back to this. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is create action. So I'm going to create a file. I'm keeping all these three. I'm kind of trying to keep them as separate as possible so that you guys can refer to it and see how these things. But you can put them all in the same file also, and it will work. But please don't do that. Okay. So the first thing I was saying, actions are your JavaScript objects. So I'm going to create an object. I'm going to use a constant keyword because it's not going to change. My action is not going to change. I'm going to keep calling this. I'm going to keep calling this, but I won't be changing anything. Okay. So that's why I keep it constant. And then I said there's a type. Okay. And the second is payload. Okay. The second one, the payload, kind of optional. You don't have to do it. Payload is only required if you're trying to send something with your action. And in my case, I'm going to send something. So that's why I have a payload. I'll show you how to use payload. And then the easier part is just remove it. So you don't really need it. But what you need is this type. Okay. And this type defines what your action is. So my action over here is type is add. I'm going to add something. Okay. And then I'm going to create another object or action, and this is going to be called subtract. So I'm going to say type subtract, and then I'm going to pass in a payload. Okay, my payload, I'll show you an example. It's going to pass in 2. Okay, this is my payload. So what I'm doing is whenever I call this action, I'm going to pull this value out from my actions, and I'm going to perform some operation on it. Okay, again, payload is not required, optional. If you're trying to pass in something, or you want to tie something together with your action, that's when you use a payload. Okay, but the more important part of it is a type, because based on this type, you're going to perform some actions. Okay. So since, and this is it, this is how you define actions. All right, simple JavaScript objects, literally JavaScript objects. We created 2 objects, add and subtract, and then put in 2 attributes, type and payload. Okay. Any questions on this? Good. So I think this is the easiest one, at least for me, because there's no extra new knowledge required, and I don't have to worry about it. The only thing I know is actions are JavaScript objects, so I just create an object and I'm done. Okay. The only thing is, since this is in a separate file, so I'm going to export this out so that I can access them outside. Okay. And that's it should be the end of my actions. All right, let's go to the next thing is, well, let's create our store. So let me create a new file here. I'm going to call it store. Okay. So remember what the store was? This is the global state store that stores everything. Okay, so this is what I'm creating now. All right. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to import from Redux. Okay, and which module are we importing? It's called create store. It gives you a nice documentation. Let's take a look at it. Okay. For now, I just need this. Okay, and then when we were discussing store, I said what's the method to create store? Let's create store. So let's go ahead and create our store. Create store. Oops. Okay. So I'm creating my store. And I call this method. Why am I doing const store? This next line will explain this. This is why I did put it into a variable. The reason I did this was because just like actions, my store is going to be accessed outside, so I need to export it. So that's why I put it into a variable. Const because it doesn't change. Okay, and that's how you do this store. Now what was part of the store? As a create store has one parameter, right? Reducer. So you need to pass in a pure function, which is a reducer. So if you call your method reducer, that's what you're going to pass in, right? At this point we do not have this function, so next step would be to create this reducer. All right. Okay. You can get fancy. I'm going to create the reducer just over here because there's no need to access the reducer anywhere else. Do you think you're going to access reducer outside the store? No. Right? Because your the only thing required is when you put in this method create store, that's the only thing that your reducer require. That's the point of the reducer. Just keep it local over here since you really don't need it outside anywhere else. So let's go ahead and create a function reducer. Okay, now I'm using the ES6 syntax. You guys remember ES6 syntax? It's this and then your arrow function and then your curly brackets. Okay, so this is what I'm using. So my method is called reducer. Again, you can rename this to anything just for the sake so that we drill our concepts in. That's why I'm calling it reducer. You can call it anything you want, something reducer. All right. Maybe a website, the app is add and subtract, so like a calculator reducer, I don't know, something. Okay. All right. So remember what I said was reducer takes in 2 parameters. All right. Anybody remember what they were? What's the first one? State or current state. Okay. The second is action. Oops. Okay, that's what you do. So your reducer takes in 2 parameters, state and action, and that's what you just pass in state and action. Okay. Now your reducer is the one that, what does it do? It returns the new state. You pass in the current state and you get the new state back. Okay. So how does your new state gets updated? It's based on some action. Okay. You take an action and then your state gets updated. So over here, our actions are add and subtract. Okay. So what we are going to do is I'm going to use a switch statement. You can use if also, but don't use if. At this point, we are kind of very knowledgeable, so we are kind of writing good code. I'm going to use the switch statement, and I'm going to check what action came in. Okay. Let's suppose my action was add, then I'm going to do something. Okay, and my second action was subtract. Yes, case okay. Okay. The second way, so simple, you can put in add over here because we actually know what the type is, right? Remember we created this actions file over here. We exactly know what type is. So I put in my type, I just hard coded over here. Now, if I don't want to hard code it, right? I want to make sure that whatever type gets added over here, I just check for that type. Okay, so how do I access this? I would say something dot subtract dot type. Right, that's how you access this type without hard coding it. So for that, I would have to say access that action over here. And if I want to access something that is outside, I need to import that. All right. So what am I trying to import from? I'm trying to import from the actions.js, right? And I want to import everything from actions. We can do this from oops, sorry. Okay, this syntax is star is saying import everything, and as is just renaming that star. It's kind of hard to use the star in your code. So what we have done is import everything and call it actions. That's what we have done. Okay, just an import statement from our actions file. So what this will let me do is now I can access this actions dot, you see, subtract. Is this enough or do I need to go deeper? So if I do actions dot subtract, what happens? It stops over here. But I'm trying to check the type. Okay. This is the same same thing as this thing. And the first one I hard coded add. The second one I'm just showing you a better way to do it. Right? You don't have to hard code everything. You can access whatever actions are over there, and then. So what this will happen, this will let you do is, if I go over here for some reason, I'm like, no, I don't want uppercase, I want lowercase. Okay. So what's going to happen is my add is going to fail, but my subtract is always going to work. It's a good practice to kind of use constants when trying to access something. Okay. For now, I'm going to keep it same thing, so the guys have both functionality over here. Okay. The next thing is we have to return a new state. Okay. So this is my return statement. I'm going to return my new state. Okay. What is my new state? When it comes to add, I take my payload value, take my current state, and then basically add that payload and then return the new value. All right. Again, going back, you guys remember what state is? State is also just a JavaScript object that has some attributes inside it. Okay. In this case, my attribute is result. I haven't defined it yet, but I know I'm going to define it. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying state dot result. What is this state? This is the current state. All right. Now I know at this point there's a state and it has a variable. I haven't created that result yet. I'm going to do it, but I know there's going to be a result variable, and I'm going to add that to my action dot payload dot value. Okay. Again, my current state is going to come in. It will have a variable called result. It's going to take that result and just add this value. And what is my value over here? It's in my actions. Right now it's set to 2. It's going to keep adding 2. Okay. Again, let me rename this to current state. Maybe this is my current state. Okay. Again, remember what is state. State is just a JavaScript object. All right. Remember when we create state, we just say state, and then we create an object, and we put in over here it's result, some value. Okay, that's what state is. All right. So I'm saying that when my current state comes in, this thing, it's going to have a variable called result. Pick that value out, add it to this value, and then return it. Okay? Everybody good on this? Any questions on this? The syntax is not correct, but I'm going to fix it. But this is what it is going to be. All right, it's going to add it. So what's my new return? My new state is basically the new number. That's what it is. That's what it means when you say new state. Okay. The correct syntax for this is return state. Okay. Current state. Current state. Okay, what is going on over here? This dot 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 is called spread operator. Okay, this is part of your new ES6. You guys remember? What it is doing is basically taking this thing and copying this into this value. That's what it is doing. Okay, this is basically saying add this, return this state. This is just a new way to write it in ES6. That's why I'm showing you, kind of get into that habit. But what is happening is it will add these two, put it in the result, and it will copy everything into current state. Right? Result is part of current state, right? If this is this object, and this object has an attribute called result. So it will take, if it had like multiple attributes, it's going to take all those attributes and assign it to this big object. That's what it is doing. That's what the spread operator does. Instead of you writing like 2 lines and copying it over and returning it, in this one it's kind of intelligent enough to copy everything over. Okay? At this point, just remember the okay, I don't need this. I don't need the break because I'm already returning it. All right, the break won't be reach. Right. The same thing over here. I'm going to just copy this, return. The only thing is I am now subtracting. Okay. All right, so we started with actions. We came down to our store. We created the store. Store requires a pure function, a reducer. Now we are defining a reducer. What is the reducer doing? Reducer is basically updating your state. All right, you guys realize that what's happening is you're passing in a current state, does some action, and then returns you the new state. So basically your reducer is the one that is updating the state. Okay. In default, what you can do is you can just pass in current state. You can put in a error message if you want. So what is happening is if something other than these two come in, I just return the current state. Okay. No action was basically taken. I just returned the same state. All right. So I defined my reducer. I did this. I did my store, and that's it. All right. Any questions? Good. So we set up the store. We did the actions. We did the reducers. Okay. Now the only thing remaining is we need to set it up in our, let me see the documentation here. I'm going to get started. Oops. And then this thing over here. We have to set up the store. So if I look at the documentation over here, click this. So I have my store created and everything, and this is the part that is now missing. Okay, and I'll show you what to do. But this is in the documentation. I'm going by the documentation. So the first thing they are saying, create the store. We did that, and then we have to set it up. And where do we have to set it up? We have to set it up in our index.js file. Okay, so let's go to our index.js file. You see over here, this thing. The first thing is, let's go ahead and import, and then I'll show you why is this important over here. So we're going to import store. And why are we going to do this? Because again, the documentation is saying you have to create a store over here. So to achieve this, our store is in a different file. So we are going to export that from our store file. Okay. And then they're saying do this thing. So I'm just going to copy this and put it here. All right, what is happening here? What did I just do? App, store, store. Will? Yes, excellent. You guys recognize this? This is a props. App is your component, and this is just a prop. So you are creating a prop, and then you are assigning some value to it. All right, and the value is store. Okay, and this is how you set up the store. Okay, index.js, go to your set that pops up, and this store is now going to be passed down. That's why you set it in your app. Now this store, this is how the store is accessible to all your components. App is your parent component. It's always going to be a parent, and basically you're passing down the store. All right, what else? Let's go to our app component and then render those things on our screen. Okay. Let's see. Let me create a p tag. I'm going to show the result here. Okay. I'm going to create a variable and show the result over here. We'll see what that variable is. And then I need two buttons. So let's go ahead and create button and then one more button. Okay. And in this one, I'm going to create my on click. When I do on click, it should do something which is adding. And we'll add this. And this is going to be my subtract button. Okay, so what do I have to do? On click, I have to create a function that adds it, and then on subtract, I have to create a function that subtracts it, right? So let's put in this dot add, okay, and this dot subtract. Okay, any questions on this? Pretty straightforward. I have created two buttons, add and subtract, and on their click I have to call a function that adds it and then subtract it. Okay, I still haven't created those two functions, so I'm going to go ahead and create those two next, but this is what my buttons are doing. So I have the first one, I'm going to show my result. I still have to put in something over here. We'll see what that is, and then I have to create those two buttons. All right, so since I already have these methods, let's go ahead and create our add function. So add using the arrow functions. Where's the arrow? Okay, stub it out. I don't have to pass in anything right now. I'll just because I already have that value in my actions, I'm just going to add it. Now you guys see what I'm doing over here? I'm doing this dot props dot store. Why am I doing it? Because I'm getting the store, right? From my app, I'm getting the store, and I'm just accessing that store over here. Okay. And this props is accessible to any component that you make, so that's how you do it. Okay. Now the next method is we want to call that when the add happens, you want that action to fire. Okay, an event to fire. All right, and store has a method called dispatch. Okay, dispatch, as the name sounds, is going to fire an event that's going to update your state. Again, remember, state is read only. You cannot use set state over here, but my add function is updating the state, right? So I need to update the state. And how do I update the state? You have to fire an event. And firing an event in Redux is dispatch. So you have to dispatch, and then you have to tell what action happened. What action are you trying to fire? And I'm trying to fire add. Okay. You can do hard-coded add over here. Let's go ahead and import our add over here too, so that I don't have to hard-code that from actions. Okay, and then I can do over here is actions dot add. Okay, yes.
How would that have been different than if it just wrote in add in string?
Right. What? So your dispatch is finding an action. Okay. And what are actions? Actions are your JavaScript objects. What is the object over here? This is the object, not this.
So would you be able to put it in
Yeah.
a group brackets instead?
In what? You cannot put an object in a double as a string. You have to pass in the whole object.
Can you pass in an object with the curly brackets? With JSF?
Oh, yeah. You can totally do this, yeah, and put something here. Yeah, you can do that. But the thing, why am I not doing over here? Because I already did this over here. Already did this. But you can totally copy this thing.
So you have to do the whole object.
Yeah, you have to do the whole object. So you have to do like this. As long as it is an action, which is a JavaScript object, this will work. Okay, that's a good question. Let me go back. Yeah. Okay, so I'm passing an action, and that should do it. Create the subtract function, same thing. I'm going to copy paste, call it subtract. This time I'm passing in subtract. Okay. Everybody got the concept of dispatch? You are dispatching an action that will update the state. Okay. Now there's another concept called, we saw dispatch. Then store has another method called subscribe. Alright. What subscribe does is that it is saying that somebody has to listen to that event, right? I'm firing that event, but there should be a subscriber who kind of handles those events. Alright. What it means is this dot tops dot store. Okay, it has a method called subscribe. I'm going to fix the coding part. Okay, and subscribe takes in a function. Okay, and let's see what that function does is. So I'm going to create this thing. Okay, this is how you write the subscribe method. You have to subscribe. Now, what would be the right time to call this subscribe? Huh? On click or when your page loads. Right? You don't have to wait until somebody clicks it. You want your subscribe to be already listening to something before your click happens. So the good method would be, if you guys remember, component did mount. Alright, remember from our previous activities that we were using this method to show the screen with default values or default search, right? So you can use the same method here and then make sure that this, your subscribe is completed. Okay, now I have to do something over here. Well, this at this point this should be good, right? That's all you have to do. All right. The next part is, the only reason is I want to show something over here, right? Okay. Before I type in anything, this should be complete, and you guys should be. These are all the components that are required to create a simple Redux store, actions, and reducers. Any questions on that? Okay. The next part, remember we talked about the local state also. I said that this is a global store, but can your components still have their own state? Yeah, they can. And why is it okay? Because it's not accessible to anywhere else, so it's not going to affect anything. But they kind of can have their own state. And why would you need your own state? The reason would be that you want to update something on your screen that is local over here and just want to show it. All right? So I just need a variable that gets updated. What I mean here is, how do I declare my state? I say state and then my as a result. Let me set it to 0. Okay? And then over here, every time my state changes, it will just show me the new result. That's why I need that variable. Okay? Again, this is optional. You don't need to have that local state, but I want to keep show on something on the screen. That's why I'm using this result, that whatever gets updated, it just shows up over here. And since I am using a local state, I want this state to be updated. All right? So how do I update this? I will use .props .store. Again, how do you get the state? Same method gets it. The only difference that I'm getting it from the store. I'm not getting anything local. Okay, and this is how you get the state. I still need to assign it to my variable over here, but this is how you would get the state. All right, get state, but the difference is I'm getting the state from the store, not from anywhere else. Yes?
If you get the state from the store, would that differ than the state you set locally?
It will not. No, because I'm going to assign the exact same state in the next line. Well, in the same line now. Right, so I need to assign this. Let me use fancy this thing. Make sure you guys remember. You guys remember this syntax? Again, ES6, if it had multiple attributes, it's going to assign it right now. This is same as right now, this is same as same result is equal to this. All right, but kind of make sure guys remember this syntax. If I had these things, what will happen is if my get state was returning my 3 attributes which were called result A and B, is going to automatically assign it to everything. All right. All right. So this kind of review for that to make sure guys remember this. How do I set the local state? Use the this.setState method. All right. This is again, this is all React. At this point, this is React. This is part of ES6. This is React. This is also part of React. This is not part of Redux. Finished at the subscribe event. Now what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I have the new variable updated so that I can show on my screen. And my object is called results. Okay, so this will go ahead, update this this attribute which is over here. All right, and the reason is so that I can just see it on the screen anytime something updates. Okay. All right, that should be it. So let's go ahead and it should be running, right? Okay. So this is how my screen is. If I add, it's going to add by 2. Subtract is going to subtract it. All right. Oh. Cannot read property result of undefined. Cannot read property result of undefined, and this is in our store. So something happened over here. Let's go back and see. So it's saying that I clicked the add button, right? So that's correct. Then I said current state, and then I want to add the value, but it says cannot read the property result. So this means it cannot read this value, current state dot result, which means it cannot read current state. Yes.
Could you have a local state on that store that
Yep. So the issue over here is in your function you need to pass in a default state, and this will occur the first time because I don't have any state right now. It's empty, right? But I'm saying whatever my current state is, do something to it. But the problem with this is I don't have that local state defined, or I don't, the state right now doesn't exist. So I need to give it a default state. All right. So how I can do is, as Dylan was saying correctly, you can create a local state and just set default state. Okay, an object same as that result. Put it as 0. This is the part of the syntax. Again, what this does is if your current state is null, it's going to assign that value. That's what this syntax does. Okay, get the current state. If it is null, put this default state and then use that. Okay, if current state is not null, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, and then you can go ahead and add and subtract. And that completes the demo. So we all looked at how the 3 parts. Alright, we saw how we code them. We started with actions, then I created my store. Store requires a reducer. I created my reducers. In my index.js file, I added my store. Alright, created the store. The last part was in my app.js, I'm finding those events. So I'm dispatching every time that a click happens, I dispatch an event saying, hey, go ahead and add it. All right, but before that, when my page mounts, I want to make sure that my subscribe is called. So subscribe, dispatch, create store. If you want to get the state, use your get state method, and that should give you back your state. Okay, that was the Redux in 1.5 hours. Kind of makes sense, or it is confusing. I will say that it is confusing. Again, the problem with this, we have not done enough React apps yet, but once you do enough React apps, you will really appreciate this once you reach a point. You know, remember I show you some concepts and then I tell you, hey, there's an easy way, and you guys are, well, you should have taught this before, right? This is the same thing over here. The only reason you guys are not saying that you should have taught this before is because, you know, we lack that appreciation right now because we haven't done enough, right? Any questions?
What was the last thing you said?
I added a default state so that if this is null, it just takes this default state, which is result is 0. Yeah. If I don't do this, the first time at the app fires, the state is always going to be null. It's going to keep failing. All right. So that's why you need to put a default state. All right, any other questions? Any questions on the Redux part, Redux concepts? If you guys get asked this in your interview, you guys will be able to answer, right? Don't be like, I don't know, she talked about Redux something React. Don't say Redux is part of React. At the very least, do not say that. Yes?
So if you have multiple, like right now we're working with results, but if we have multiple values that we want to control in our store,
yeah,
we still only have one reducer for that. So if we have like results, and then we also have like this, if they want to say username or something like that changes.
Yeah.
And then you have to do action type for each one.
Yes. So your actions.
All of them are in there.
Right. So your actions are going to define what. If you have a second one, result 2, and you have an action called multiply, you want only to update result 2 on multiply, you still will come over here and then add one more and say, only update the result to or only that state.
So that could end up being, depending on how many variables or values that you want to store in a global app, very
Yep.
convoluted.
Yep. Just kind of, you see the disadvantage and advantage of that. So you need to be careful how you are giving the, I mean, there is absolutely a lot of more code to get this. You saw we have to define these three and all that stuff and actions and keep track of those. So there is definitely extra code required for it. But at this point, once you reach a point where you're having so many issues, you'll be like, you know what, this is fine. I can handle that. That's why it says, when you need it, then use it. Otherwise, don't use it. This whole thing, right? It can be done with React. There's like no rocket science to it. Why would you do all this stuff and do it? But give it a try if you want in your projects. Good learning experience. Okay. Well, that's all I have. If you have any questions, let me know. The rest of the time, please spend on your projects. If you have any other questions, homework questions, or issues. Oh, I want to remind you that on Tuesday, you guys are going to be submitting the first part. You guys remember that? You guys forgot everything. Yeah. All right. So. Okay, these are the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 5 things that you guys are going to be submitting on Tuesday. Please submit it in a document so that we can see it. I might ask the group to come up and, depending on the time, just kind of walk through. The reason for that is not to embarrass anybody or you did the work. The thing is, if somebody did good thing, everybody else can see and kind of, they want to take up on some of the things. This will help. Some of the groups who are not able to achieve or kind of struggling to see how it looks like, this would help. But these are the 5 questions on Tuesday. We are going to take a look at it. Please submit those on Tuesday. And be prepared to, depending on the time, just come up and kind of answer those questions or show something. I'm more interested in this thing. I just want to see if you guys are doing this screen by screen, kind of nice thing to do. So those are the ones. Even if you have to come and present, that's the 2 things I'll be okay. Just show me the screens that you think you are going to be using, or some project management tool. Okay, and the stress is on these things because these are widely used and you guys have quite more time in the last project versus the previous ones. Okay, so this is due this Tuesday. Any questions? All right. Please make sure we submit the Word document. I'm looking at you, Eric. Don't just slack me the names of people. I know Kevin is the one who says just, wing it. Yes. Now I'm talking for the proposal. Everybody submitted a nice PDF or a Word document. You guys are the one who just slacked me one line saying, that's it. I'm like, okay.
I'm trying to find a double thumbs up emoji.
All right, you guys can break in. If you want to stay here, you can work here, go somewhere else. It's fine. We'll be here 9:30, 10. Let us know if you have any questions. Okay. And even for Saturday, I'm going to be teaching Saturday. So if you have any review thing, please let me know before Saturday. I can review that topic also. If not, I'm going to try something different. There's something called React Native. I'm kind of new to it too, but I just wanted to show it to you guys. It's like you can create your mobile apps using React. It's kind of interesting thing that's going around too. So if you don't have any review part, I'll just show you how to set it up. I'm gonna try it too. So it's just another thing. If you are interested in creating mobile apps with the same skill set, you can use React Native. let's show that one side. Yes.
So, with the create React through the
And we
command line and whatnot, is that going to be like a full version of React, or is that like a light version?
full complete.
So, when you use React in the workplace, would you usually use create React app?
That's how you do
We're gonna start coding as the boilerplate code is. I mean, you can do everything from scratch, but I don't know why you would do that. There's no reason to do it. Before, maybe like 2-3 years ago, that's how I did it. Like you had to create, right? Like,
Yeah, have it package create React app.
yeah, you had to set up so many things that
But the amount of files that are
they've improved a lot.
yeah.
So I think where
Yeah.